a seismic election that will change the face of South Africa forever. An ANC decimated, a surging MK party, analysts' predictions dashed, the polls in many ways confirmed, but you know SMWX had your back. Let's get into what these early results appear to be meaning for the South African election. And just as I took you through the importance of the polls building up to this election, I'll help you make sense of what is happening. Make sure you don't just watch the numbers ticking up as they go, and help you assess what this election means for this country. It's massive. Let's get into it. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. If you're new around here, we're a channel with 100,000 subscribers, you know, that's just like what we do around here. Thank you so much. I've got so many comments, so many messages. Can you believe it? We asked for 100,000 subscribers by election day, and can I tell you, when we made that prediction, we were shooting for the stars. And on election day, you delivered 100,000 subscribers. That is incredible, that is amazing. Thank you for voting for SMWX on election day and getting us over that milestone. From here, sky's the limit. Road to 200K, road to 1 million. In today's episode, which is probably the most important episode of this year, I want to break down what has happened as the results for this election pour in. We now have enough results to make relatively firm conclusions, and my goodness, today we woke up in a new country. So what I want to do is have a look at what happened in the national picture first, and then we'll come on to some of the provincial dynamics which are less certain. So let's start with the national picture. We can only begin in this election by talking about the absolute collapse of the ANC. Now, before this election, there were predictions in the polls, which we stuck to, which said that the ANC was going to fall like it had never fallen before, to around 43% of the vote, at least below 45. My prediction the day before the election was 44, within a 2% margin of error. But there was this view that no, the ANC will cling on, they will somehow miraculously keep their national majority, which they always have done. We can say with, I'm prepared to say, virtual certainty at this point, and I'll tell you why, that the projections of the CSIR, the projections that are coming out from other news organizations and people like DPhil are telling us that the ANC is going to finish around 42%, somewhere around there. Maybe 2% margin for error, maybe 1%, but their vote will have collapsed from 57 to 42 or somewhere thereabouts. And that has dramatic ramifications for South Africa's political landscape. Because here's what it means. The ANC will not be able to create a coalition by taking a party like the IFP. As it currently stands, it won't be able to create a coalition by taking any of the small parties. And what that means is that the ANC is then faced with what looks like a trilemma at the moment. I'll get to the MK because that's the only remaining uncertainty, because the CSIR projection is based on past results and the MK never contested before. But what that means is that the ANC is in a trilemma. It must either choose the DA nationally to work with, or the EFF, or the MK, or some combination of those three, as things currently stand at 42-43. What a position for the country to be in and for the ANC to be in. So what do they do? If they go with the DA, that is a momentous, historic decision, which will probably be music to the ears of parties like MK and EFF, because they will make hay with that kind of coalition. Do they go with the EFF? In which case, markets probably go into some kind of meltdown. The media goes into hysteria. Or do they go with MK, which probably does a similar thing? Or do they create some kind of EFF-MK coalition? These are the options before South Africa, and these are the options before the ANC, based on the national results that we have in, and the projections of those results. Now, just to be clear, the CSIR has projected elections to within 1% at around about this stage of elections. There may still be some uncertainty, which may create a few other percentage points of uncertainty, but take these numbers very seriously today. What does this mean for President Cyril Ramaphosa, who now is the ANC president who has presided over the fastest and steepest fall in ANC electoral politics? He emerges from this election a much diminished, weakened figure, a lame duck president staring at an ANC conference in 2027, a diminished ANC majority, and the need to reach across some aisle or another to fight for his political life. I think this election has massive consequences for Cyril Ramaphosa. Even if he holds on as president, he will be a very different president, facing very different calculus. And the days of ANC dominance are long, long behind us. That parliamentary sitting could be very interesting, but we'll see how things unfold. For the DA, things seem to be stable, which is exactly what we predicted, somewhere around the 21% mark. And really the DA has been between this 20 and 22% mark for 3 elections now. So the DA truly seems to have reached its electoral ceiling at 20% of the vote. And what that means, I think, is that interesting discussions will be happening internally in the DA. They haven't fallen if they remain around 21, but they haven't really risen either. And so the DA has stagnated. And as the DA tries to negotiate a pact with the ANC, questions about John Steenhuisen's leadership will also figure largely in DA calculus, because he hasn't taken the party to a much bigger percentage of the vote, nor has it dropped. So his position looks tenuous, but it's not clear because he hasn't dropped very far or grown very far. But what will encourage the DA is the projection that they seem set to hold on to the Western Cape, which will spur them as they move forward in this election. We come to the EFF and MK, and I'm going to start with MK because, here my daughter, the MK did not come to play in this election as predicted. And there are 2 major storylines in this election, and they're linked. The one is the fall of the ANC, and the other is the rise of the MK. They have taken KwaZulu-Natal by storm. They have shocked in places like Mpumalanga, even in places in Gauteng, in Eastern Cape, in certain VDs and wards, they have shocked. And remember what we said in terms of that Constitutional Court case and the cases building up in this election. They put the MK in the spotlight, and exactly at a time when the party could have fractured internally. The wins and the Constitutional Court loss gave the MK an opportunity to coalesce and unite right before the election, right in the glare of the South African media. And that was a tremendous moment for the MK. I think they have really surged in this election, particularly in KZN. However, what I would say is that the projections are a little bit difficult to discern on MK because they have never participated in an election before. So the CSIR is projecting them out at 13. I've seen some other projections which are putting them closer to 7. We don't know exactly where they're going to fall. But for present purposes, that doesn't really matter because they will be a force in this election. The idea that it was all just media hype and spectacle was wrong. The MK didn't come to play, and we'll just see exactly where they land up in that spectrum of real overperformances in the 13s or so. The lower bound would be somewhere around 7, but we'll see where they fall there. But it's a dramatic day, and Jacob Zuma, former president, has had the last laugh in this election in many ways and has humbled the ANC like it has never been humbled before. And then we come to the EFF. And if the projection of somewhere between 9 and 12 is true, as we predicted as well on this channel, the EFF won't be happy. It will be a different kind of election for them because they have always survived on this idea that they're a growing party. And there were polls before the MK came on the scene that put the EFF in the high teens and the 18s and 19s. For them to remain where they are or even contract slightly is not great for them. They will be disappointed, I think. But at the same time, they had a very difficult election. The rise of MK, they weren't the new shiny object, and they managed to hold on to their base. Yes, in the immediate aftermath of this election, they will not look like they're in a great position, but they are still a force in South African politics, and they will continue to exert that force in a similar way that they have over the last 5 years. And they will be involved in coalition discussions. We'll see which way the ANC goes. But I wouldn't be so quick to count out the ANC talking to the EFF either. They come from the same place. They can find each other if necessary. So I don't buy into this narrative that, this is a disaster day for the EFF, nor do I buy into the narrative that they're going to suddenly resurface and get into the high teens. I think it'll be a consolidation election for them. And in the immediate aftermath, that won't look great. But I think as South African politics unfolds, the EFF will continue to have a strong presence on the political landscape. And that's really where I would put the big four parties right now. The underlying message is that we woke up in a new country today, nationally, with the ANC a significantly diminished force, a force that will have to form a coalition government, and a force that could be in the low 40s, and at the absolute best case, the mid-40s. But I think the writing is on the wall for where they're going to land up nationally. Just a few caveats. We don't know what the difference between the regional and the national ballot will be, so we'll look out for that. But I don't think that the deviation will be too massive, and if it is big, I don't see how that deviation will actually help the ANC. If anything, it might actually hurt them as people split away from the ANC to other parties regionally. So that's the end of the national analysis right now. It's a massive day for this country. It's a really, really massive day for this country, and I don't think we have begun to appreciate the profundity of what South Africans did. What I also want to say is two things. The way that South Africans stuck in those election lines brings a tear to my eye, because it would have been so easy in the cold to turn away, but people stuck to the message that they wanted to send in this election. Young people who have been derided and told that they don't care about politics, young people said no in this election. They came out in this election, and they made their mark in this election. And that was a dramatic moment. Shout out to all the young South Africans who stayed in those lines at universities and in their different voting stations and changed the shape of South African history by doing that. As far as the IEC is concerned, just while we're on the national picture, they had a bad day yesterday. And it's true, and I have a lot of sympathy for the fact that the IEC budget has been cut. And that's what happens when you cut a budget of a state institution or a Chapter 9 institution like the IEC. Having said that, the IEC still should have been able to predict that lines would have been longer, that time would have been longer. And they should have done the work to prepare South Africans for that. We didn't get any communication which said that until 3 in the morning in some places people would be lining up. So either one of two things happened. The IEC, and make no mistake, I'm not impugning the IEC's credibility. I think we've had a credible election. That will be discussed in more detail later when we can really review it properly. So I'm not disputing the freeness and fairness of the election, but what I am saying is that I don't think that the IEC has been perfect. I think they've made a lot of mistakes in the run-up to this election. They were dealt bad cards with a monstrosity of an electoral system, new changes, and a diminished budget, so that's for sure. But either they didn't predict what happened yesterday, in which case they were caught flat-footed, or if they did predict what happened yesterday, they should have done much more to prepare South Africans, to tell them that the lines and the queues would have been much, much slower. And they needed to do one or the other. And I think that we do need to hold them accountable for the length of time that many South Africans had to stand in those queues to exercise their democratic right. Now, having said that, I want to come on to some of the provincial dynamics because I think these are going to be central in this election as well. And these are a lot less certain, but let's have a look at what's happening provincially because there are fascinating patterns emerging, and let's get into that. So let's talk about the provinces. So what do we virtually know that's happened? Well, it looks like the DA has hung on to the Western Cape, according to various projections. It looks like the ANC, we know the ANC will hold on to Limpopo and the ANC will hold on to the Eastern Cape. So what we're left with is a series of different elections which are either going to be slim ANC majorities, or in the worst case scenario for the ANC, they're going to lose their majorities in more provinces than are expected. So what we also know is that Gauteng for the ANC majority is gone. Gauteng is gone. KZN is gone. KZN is gone. Okay, so that is seismic alone. So ANC has lost Western Cape a long time ago. It has lost Gauteng majority and it has lost the KZN majority. So it is no longer able to dictate what happens in the three biggest economic provinces in South Africa. Then, what we also know is that there are going to be a series of very interesting races with either a slim ANC majority or in a shock scenario the ANC losing other provinces in addition. So we have a case like Mpumalanga. Mpumalanga has been an ANC stronghold for a very long time. Right? Like we're talking 65% and 70% in past elections. And along comes the MK and shocks the ANC into either a slim majority. So what it's looking like in Mpumalanga is around the 52 to 55 mark. Right? That is a massive development in South African politics. For the ANC that once virtually dictated Mpumalanga to now be down to holding on to its majority by fine margins is a massive, massive moment in this election. So you've got Mpumalanga. Look carefully at that because even if the ANC hangs on and wins that, which I think they will, that creates massive shifts. Then you have a province like the Northern Cape. And there again, I told you to watch out for the Northern Cape. And the Northern Cape looks like it's going to be on a knife edge. Maybe a very slim ANC majority there. But it's possible that it might just be a slim minority, or the ANC being the biggest party but not over 50. But once again, no matter which side of that dividing line we fall, for the ANC to lose further ground in the Northern Cape just means that their hold on power there is all the more unstable. So now we've got Western Cape, Gauteng, KZN, Mpumalanga, Northern Cape, where the ANC is either not the dominant party, or it is, and bear with us because you can imagine there's a lot happening at the Rock, or the ANC has a slim majority. We come to a place like Free State, same story. We come to a place like Northwest, same story. So outside of Limpopo and outside of Eastern Cape, the ANC's hold on provinces as a national majority is either falling or is much slimmer than it has ever been. And what that means is that the instability of coalition politics, to the extent that it exists, is going to permeate all three spheres of South African government: the national, the provincial, and we've already had it at the local. Having said that, let's not get too carried away with all this talk of instability, because we have lived through instability. Load shedding is instability. Stage 6 was instability. Poverty, unemployment, and inequality have been instability. But what is about to happen in all spheres of South African governance is that coalition negotiations are going to unfold, and we'll see whether those coalition negotiations are more like what we've seen in the minority of cities like Joburg and Nelson Mandela Bay, where they have been very unstable, or they will be more stable in due course, as they have been in other smaller municipalities and districts and local councils. The picture of coalitions is actually positive, but the problem is that there is a minority of coalitions that have really been very unstable, and they're in the big places. So I think what we do when we take a step back, it's hard to know when you're living through a moment of real history. And there have been some question marks as to whether this election would deliver such a moment. But my key takeaway is that we woke up today in a new country, a country of equal parts uncertainty and possibility. And now we must summon the wisdom collectively as a country to re-navigate our political landscape and find a new way of governing our country which delivers on the hopes of all those people who stood in long, cold lines on election day. Thank you once again for watching SMWX. Like, share, subscribe. Help us get to 200,000 subscribers. Thank you for the 100K. Of course, we'll continue to unpack these results as they become more and more clear. But what I will tell you is look at what the CSIR is saying, look at what Davie Schultz is saying, and make sure that you take those projections very seriously. They'll become more and more accurate as the hours roll on, and we'll be right there to cover all of that and dissect and analyze that with you. Keep it locked on SMWX. Like, share, subscribe. Aye.